Welcome to the Beau Show. China, China, China. How could we not focus on this regime when they are clearly a threat domestically, globally, ideologically, and biologically? Xi Jinping, president of the CCP, marked the 100-year anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party with some fighting words. Take a listen.
At the same time, the Chinese people will never allow any foreign forces to bully, oppress, or enslave us. Anyone who dares try to do that will have their heads bashed bloodied against the Great Wall of Steel, forged by over 1.4 billion Chinese people.
Did I hear him correctly? I hope the translation is accurate. He said anyone who attempts to push them around would have their heads bashed against the iron of the Great Wall. Wow, that's pretty fierce. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Joe Biden had some ice cream and posed with the LA Dodgers. What a signal of great might and strength. We know that China has been engaging in human rights abuses for many, many years, such as forced sterilizations, forced labor camps, crackdowns on any dissent, and re-education camps forced upon Uyghur Muslims. While this has drawn criticism from various international groups, not much has changed, because no one is willing. And the thing of it is, many U.S. brands are complicit in this. Companies like Apple and Nike and the NBA, you know, the ones virtue signaling and getting involved in election security laws. These are the brands you buy on a daily basis that still do business with China and have products made in China. They love telling you how bad Republicans are and their laws, but are mum when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party's abuses. Imagine them putting out a statement to Xi Jinping about their labor camps. And John Cena recently apologized to the Chinese for making a mistake about calling Taiwan an independent country. China has been ramping up pressure on Taiwan, even though the two separated in a civil war in 1949. But China is determined to bring Taiwan back under its control by force if necessary. The U.S. is legally required to ensure Taiwan can defend itself. China also has essentially abandoned what was the One Country, Two Systems agreement from 1997 in dealing with Hong Kong. China passed a national security law that began cracking down on any dissent and pro-democracy demonstrations. We also know, as I've reported here before, that the Epoch Times printing press in Hong Kong has been vandalized many, many times, likely by the CCP. Pro-democracy activists and journalists have been arrested and parks sealed off where demonstrations had been taking place. Now, I want to contrast what's going on there with what's happening here in America as we come off celebrating our independence and freedom. Think of the protests that we have had here in the United States, especially last year. Violence, looting, destruction of property, lighting things on fire, all as part of an expression of rage. People in Hong Kong are protesting in favor of just good old-fashioned democracy, basic freedom. The two types of protest are in stark contrast to one another. Also, compare the minimal arrests and even bailouts of those who committed crimes during the protest here in America versus the massive arrests in Hong Kong. True to its propaganda nature, China Daily jumped to Xi Jinping's defense saying, quote, "One country, two systems is never something that will turn Hong Kong into an independent or semi-independent place. Just the contrary. It is a security line that protects Hong Kong and its 7.47 million people from the evil hands of foreign-backed political forces and secessionists," end quote. There you have it. China views Hong Kong as not independent, but as a proxy space that ensures it will never be a democracy, calling anyone in favor of democracy evil. Ever since about 2016, China has become much more aggressive. Recently, with respect to the U.S.'s potential outreach to Taiwan, a Chinese spokesperson said, quote, "There is zero room for compromise and not an inch to give. We urge the U.S. side to grasp the situation, earnestly abide by the One China principle and the Three China-U.S. joint communiques, refrain from playing with fire, immediately stop official contact with Taiwan in any form," end quote. It's very clear China wants to export only its bad ideas of communism, never import good ideas based upon freedom. China has also been expanding its military influence into the South China Sea. Fox News reported in April that around 220 Chinese paramilitary ships manned by maritime militias swarmed around a disputed reef in the South China Sea. China maintained that the vessels are simply fishing boats, sheltering in the area due to poor sea conditions, but they did no fishing, and the weather has been good. China has been moving forward with its Belt and Road Initiative, a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure program to link China with more than 100 countries through railroad, shipping, and energy projects. This is being done to try to compete with and even overtake the United States in trade. Now, as you recall, Donald Trump took a tough approach with China, especially on trade by new stiff tariffs. It was really the first time in modern times that a president actually stood up and did something. But Trump had been talking about this long before he ever became president.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined, I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing, this country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been, believe me.
Joe Biden has been far less confrontational, but has continued some of Trump's trade tariffs and further limiting U.S. investment on firms linked to the Chinese military. But I guess he's perfectly okay with the NBA and other companies doing business with China. Biden has created a task force to assess future challenges to China. But that's the Biden way. Give it lip service by creating a task force, which really doesn't do anything. It's an empty group. Tariffs are real actions. The G7 leaders released a statement criticizing China's human rights abuses, but again, that's all lip service. It's pretty weak. It's just so these suits can say they did something and acknowledged it, when in actuality, it's a very weak response. U.S. billionaire investor Charlie Munger, VP of Berkshire Hathaway, praised China's totalitarianism when it came to COVID-19 pandemic by simply shutting the country down for 6 weeks. We know that China took draconian measures to stop the spread after concealing the outbreak by silencing whistleblower doctors, such as sealing off residents' doors and forcing people to take unproven drugs. In January, Human Rights Watch called out these abuses. See, China silences its internal critics or kills them. But for Charlie Munger to praise this is yet another unconscionable thing. He's totally okay with the origin of the virus and the response, which is total lack of freedom. He also has praised the Chinese economy and ripped on our own free market economy. See, this is what I don't comprehend. You get people like Charlie Munger praising how China does things, yet he himself would never live there. It's so easy and lazy for Americans to criticize America and fawn over other systems while they enjoy the comforts of the very liberty that they trash. These people don't live under Chinese communist rule. They never practice what they preach. LeBron James is very quick to tell you about systemic racism, but has no issue with making money from China. And how about organ harvesting? A former public security officer in China has recounted how the Chinese government would harvest human organs from death row prisoners. He told the Epoch Times of industrialized supply chain of this type of organ harvesting, directed by the CCP. Later, this same anonymous officer recounted that after he witnessed harvesting from non-consenting donors after execution, he then witnessed live organ extraction from people, such as practitioners of Falun Gong, a meditative practice and movement. This was done on a mass scale. That group has been banned in mainland China. I wonder what Charlie Munger thinks of that. Is that worthy of his admiration and praise as well? Does he love that lack of free speech and religious exercise? Chinese hospitals seeking to entice organ transplant tourists from abroad promised organ transplants in a matter of weeks or even days, which is unheard of in developed countries with established organ transplant systems, where wait times could stretch on for years. China essentially created this supply chain model. The surge in transplants coincided with the onset of the CCP's persecution of Falun Gong, a meditative discipline whose 70 to 100 million adherents have faced arrests, torture, and jail over the past 2 decades. This on-demand organ harvesting and transplant service seems to be continuing today. And let's also look at the persecution of the Uyghur Muslims in China. 60 parliamentarians urged the United Nations to investigate the Chinese regime's alleged genocide against Uyghur Muslims ahead of its Human Rights Council meeting. According to reports, China has detained up to 1 million Uyghurs and subjected them to various forms of persecution. On top of it all, really, the topic du jour is the origin of the coronavirus, which has finally gained the proper traction and attention after everyone just kind of assumed and took China's word that it came from bats at a wet market, even though the first cases were right there near the coronavirus research lab in Wuhan. China shut down all travel within, but did not shut down travel leaving China, which is how it got spread so far and wide. The thing of it is, nothing happens in China without the CCP's knowledge. The scientists at the Wuhan lab are in direct contact with the Chinese military. And we know that the Chinese military even published a sort of dream paper in 2015 in which they imagined how a virus, a coronavirus, could be used as a biological weapon. And yet Anthony Fauci and his NIAID were funding this lab through subgrants. This is what we call gain-of-function research, which is how the virus gets manipulated and engineered to study it when in fact it becomes highly dangerous and infectious. Yet this is the same Tony Fauci who changed his tune about, 80 times over the last year. And one of the few guys on Capitol Hill who pressed him about this was Senator Rand Paul. So all of these are examples of how the Chinese Communist Party plays ball. They are militant, they are unrelenting, they are calculated, and they have big aims and do things daily to achieve them, whether that's in trade, infrastructure, or technology. By the way, I shouldn't fail to mention how China steals intellectual property as well. You want to do business with a Chinese company? Better be ready to share your IP. They've gotten away with this for years without reproach. So on the heels of our July 4th and how we celebrated our independence and American ideals and values, compare and contrast these to the Chinese Communist Party and its own 100-year anniversary. We've been around for about 245 years, and we have experienced some wonderful things as a country. But China, in its 100 years of communism, has experienced growth at the expense of freedom. It disrespects and squashes freedom of speech, expression, and religion. It continues to badger Taiwan and Hong Kong. It keeps North Korea under its watch and lets it be a proxy of more tyranny. People in China and North Korea cannot see the same news that you and I do, and they don't allow certain media and information there. The citizens are kept in oblivion, only that oblivion is not blissful. There is no comparison of their system to ours. They are based on fundamentally different concepts. And those who praise China never lived there. Do you see any of their athletes disrespect their anthem or their flag? No, because they would be killed or imprisoned. Yet our athletes want to burn our flag or turn their back to it. How childish, how ungrateful. Billionaires who have profited off of our capitalist free market system praise China's system and crackdowns and lockdowns. That just seems upside down. Does it not? And then China issues this warning of bashing opponents' heads against the Great Wall of China. These guys mean business. They are geopolitical foes. They are ideological foes, and they are economic foes. And when Joe Biden says he wants to build a coalition, we've been building coalitions against them for decades. There's nothing new or great about that strategy. Biden talks about President Xi like they're all best buddies, like that is somehow going to help in negotiations. It is interesting and good that Biden is maintaining the Trump tariffs, but you won't hear that from mainstream media because that might be, giving Trump some credit for something. I just think that these types of abuses and attacks on liberty should be revealed and reported all the time, because we in America get rather complacent in this country. No one really thinks about their purchases and whom it benefits. If we as consumers would buy American and hire American, we could really boost our own economy and not keep lining China's pockets. But as long as businesses want cheap labor, they are willing to do business with China, while also allowing them to steal our intellectual property. That hurts American goods and enterprise. Trump cut some good deals with China and put their feet to the fire. We don't really know what Joe Biden is doing yet, other than a phone call he said he had. But we don't hear a lot from Biden's camp when it comes to these human rights abuses and organ harvesting and other persecutions. I think we just have to remember what we have here in America and why material goods don't have to be our only export. We should be exporting the idea of freedom, just like China has exported communism. And the sad thing is, their communism has creeped into our country like a virus, where it can be lauded among college professors and elitists and media. Bernie Sanders and AOC have proposed ideas that are highly socialist in nature, if not bordering on communist. These things come as slices of a pie, not full pie. They come bites at a time. These ideas percolate in the halls of Cal Berkeley and Columbia. The CCP gets rid of history and rich cultural traditions. That's now happening in the United States. These things don't happen overnight. So as Americans, we have to really hold on to our traditions and our culture, or it will be warped over time. Our classrooms are in a very vulnerable place right now. We have to be just as fearless and steadfast as China is, because they have actual goals. And those goals are to take over, to be number one, to beat us. Unfortunately, with this pandemic, they've been given a game plan. Yet we still have so-called experts saying they trust that the Wuhan lab wasn't the source of the virus. American ideals have been worth fighting for, and we have thankfully maintained them for this long. But as Reagan famously said, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. We know that younger generations, the more spoiled and comfortable they are, will not know the true dangers of communism. They will think of it just like some new fad or some cool new alternative system. They won't see it for its insidiousness. So we have an obligation to protect American institutions and culture. And on the heels of our own Independence Day, let's remember what it's about daily, not just on July 4th, once a year. I'm Beau, and that's the show.